back to the channel. We have a very exciting live Australian Open 2023 preview video, and it's with myself and Gill. Gill, how you doing?
I'm great. Excited to be on again. Always a good time. And glad we can be live and hopefully get to some comments a little bit later.
Yeah, for sure. I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be good. Did a few of these live type of like reviews or previews during the Australian Open, and they seem to be a relative hit. So hopefully we'll get a few people on answering some questions as well, asking some questions. And yeah, people already saying looking forward to this. That's good. Good. That's what I'd like to hear. Gil, first of all, though, before we start getting to questions and people start filtering in, what was your initial thoughts on the Aussie Open? I know we were talking about lack of sleep as timings weren't great for both of us, but in terms of the actual tennis on show, and of course Djokovic and Sabalenka came out on top, how did you find it?
Strange tournament. Very strange. It felt like the first week, every single day, there was something very interesting that happened. Whether a lot of it was, upsets, you had the Murray matches, you had Rafa going out, you had Medvedev going out. The bottom quarter completely on the men's side just completely went kaput. Um, and then in the second week, you felt the effects of that probably in a negative way, where there were some lopsided matchups. It was lacking a little bit of star power towards the end. I thought the women's final was unbelievable in terms of entertainment and quality of play. And what Novak did was so incredibly impressive.
Yeah, agreed. Actually, let's quickly talk about the women's final because you made a really good point. I thought that was so. In terms of me watching tennis, I wouldn't say it was the highest quality women's match I've watched in terms of final, like Grand Slam final, but it was up there. Like in terms
Mm-hmm.
of the quality on show, I thought it was really, really good. And what really impressed me the most was the fact that like Sabalenka, given it was her first final, she adapted quite quickly. And I know we talked about the US Open final between the men's, for example, with Ruud and Alcaraz, and I made the point to you before that I was surprised at how quickly they adapted to the occasion and just got into some of their best tennis. And I felt like Rybakina and Sabalenka, it was the same with those two. They got into some really good exchanges even. And of course, their serve. There's going to be some games where maybe not the most entertaining because they're just serving extremely well and they're so good behind their first serves. But when they started trading from the back of the court, it was extremely entertaining and some very hard fought games as well. And it was really intriguing to see both players try and work each other out tactically as well. And of course, it swung in roundabouts, which is what you like to see. And I guess for those out there, a little stat which was I found interesting was going into it. I guess if you exclude exhibitions, so Sabalenka had won each of their matches by 3 sets,
Mm-hmm.
and each time she'd won the first set, lost the second, and then won the third. So when she lost the first set, I thought, what's going to happen here? Because it's her first Grand Slam final, and losing the first set, she never lost the first set to Rybakina, so I thought she might lose in straight sets, but she'd recovered really nicely. So then, of course, win the next two. So that was also an interesting one for me doing the live like commentary for it as well. I was thinking, is she going to fold potentially, or are we going to see this new rejuvenated Sabalenka in the last year who's been through a lot really like step it up? And that's exactly what she did, which was really impressive to me as well. Who was your pick actually for the women's? Did you pick? I actually picked Sabalenka because I'm really happy about that. The men's we can talk
Nice.
about in a second because I was completely wrong. I went very left field, but as I like to do normally. But who was your pick for the women's?
Garcia. I picked Garcia, and she seemed like she was really feeling the pressure. Um, was the impression I got. Like she did scrap through a couple matches. Her serving was pretty clutch, but all in all, it felt like mentally she was struggling from the very start of the tournament, just with I think the expectations of being a top seed. So hopefully that's something that she can readjust to. I think she's well aware that that was kind of an issue. And then on your point about Sabalenka, I mean, yeah, she did lose the first set. That's a great stat you have there. But the way she lost the first set, the fact that it was 5 double faults that largely did her in, you really kind of worried about what the effect of that would be. And her second serve, I think for the remainder of the match, ended up being one of the major reasons that she went on to win the match, because Rybakina was playing a safer second serve, a more traditional kick serve that Sabalenka started to crush on the return. And Sabalenka was continuing to go after her second serve a little bit, with a little bit more pace and varied locations. And she stopped double faulting, and Rybakina couldn't really attack it.
Yeah, agreed. And actually, talking about the serve, that was a really good point about the double fault, actually. Because, of course, when you double fault, I think she double faulted to get broken, didn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah, in the first set. So that's, I mean, that would have hurt a lot. So the fact that she recovered was great. But talking of second serve, there was an interesting stat whilst I was watching it, which I don't know how accurate it was, but it said that in the first and second sets, she was kind of mixing up the second serve with like slice, flat, and I guess some top spins, so kick serves as well. But in the third set, she was of 100% of her second serves were kick serves into the back, mainly into the back and on the ad side to Rybakina. But she mixed it up to the forehand as well. At times it works, at times it didn't. But as you said, for the most part, it was reliable anyway. She didn't double fault the whole of the third set, and she was really, really solid behind it. So that was really interesting because you would have thought maybe, actually, Rybakina might have adapted given what was going on and the fact that it was consistently that kick serve, but maybe she was just struggling with, one, the fact that Sabalenka was not double faulting as much, also going for it a bit more and found a bit of rhythm on it. So that was intriguing as well. It I guess shows that variety is all well and good as long as you're able to, able to carry it out. But sometimes your tried and tested is the best weapon, especially on the big stage. A good point here from Talking Tennis. On the women's side, there's already a standout candidate for Match of the Year 2023. If one of the men's matches makes it, it will be indicative of the year. Yeah, that's a good point about the women's. On the men's then, and then we'll get some of the questions that are starting to come through as well. We can in a second. So for Djokovic, I mean, did you pick him? I'm assuming you did. I actually went for Medvedev, pretty left field. Yeah, okay. Exactly. Completely wrong. Yeah, completely wrong. The thing is, like with these picks, I always think, especially I feel like on the women's side, I don't mind as much going for like a favorite. But on the men's side, I feel like really you go for Djokovic Australian Open, Djokovic Wimbledon, you can go Rafa for Roland Garros, and the US Open, it's like a toss-up, right? Just pick a random new Grand Slam winner, but that's like the given. And I was just thinking that, maybe Medvedev after a pretty poor last year might pick it up and might recover and he might be able to make it click. But I mean, Djokovic, the news came out, didn't it, about his tear as well, his hamstring, which just makes it even more impressive, the victory. What were your thoughts on his run and how good he was throughout the tournament?
Yeah, it was so funny because on one hand, you did have this unbelievable struggle. You have Novak saying it was the most challenging tournament of my career. And I think part of that had to do with the hamstring. Part of that was the psychology of coming back to Australia after what happened last year, wanting, I think, so badly to kind of right the ship and erase those negative feelings. And that combination made it difficult. At the same time, on court, he only drops one set. It was to Enzo Cuoco, who played a very good tiebreak. But I mean, all in all, I think there were many things going in Djokovic's favor. One was obviously his form, and I think how well rested he was as a result of how much time he missed in 2022. I thought there was a really high intensity push from him after the US Open, I think through to now. And it'll be interesting to see if Novak is able to keep this up, because here's where usually we see a little bit of a lag. All right, February, vacation time, March, nothing, no major around the corner, hasn't been good at the Sunshine Double recently. That'll be interesting. But I digress. He's well rested. He gets a very good draw. Very good. And some people were circling the whole Garuna match. This was one that I got right. I said, no, I think it's going to be Rublev. And, Rublev, I think it's going to be Rublev, but at the same time, I understand that Novak hopes it's Rublev because Andre's a lot less dangerous than Holger. I would not deny that. And then the third thing was the conditions. The story this year was that it was a lower bounce and it was a deader bounce. And first of all, I think low bounce is tremendously advantageous for Novak, and it's much less talked about than court speed. People say, is it fast? Is it slow? I think height of bounce is a major, major thing. And for Novak, when the ball doesn't bounce up above his strike zone when he plays the heavy topspin players, he's able to hold the baseline and take the ball comfortably on the rise from lower contact points. I think he plays much better in those conditions. It's why he dominates Bear C. It's why he was, so good at the year-end championships for so long and won it last year. And he adapted with his flatter forehand, which he was hitting a lot bigger. And that seemed to be working really, really well in these conditions, which, by the way, also at nighttime slows it down and makes the bounce even lower. You already have a low bounce. Now cooler temperatures, even lower.
Yeah, agreed. 100%. And as you said, it plays into the tournaments that he's so dominant at, including Wimbledon, I guess, as
Wimbledon
well.
too.
Different surface, but yeah, like lower bounce, right? Exactly like what you're saying. And yeah, he seems to be the king on these types of conditions. Like I think the nighttime conditions, I think there's a stat in terms of his, I think is it ELO rating or ELO rating? I don't always know.
ELO.
ELO, is it ELO? Okay.
Yeah.
ELO rating. I think it goes up by like 400 from his average ELO rating.
No way.
Nighttime conditions. Yeah.
At night?
It went from 2,400 to 2,800 it was at night. I looked up the stat for it and I saw it actually online and I was like, whoa. I was like, crazy. So he clearly loves the nighttime conditions. And of course, there's always that chat when him and Rafa play at Roland Garros. Oh, if it's nighttime, then of course, Novak is going to have a real chance to get into it because in the day conditions, Rafa loves it because higher bounce. And of course, it's, as you said, not quite as advantageous for Novak. But incredible performance, and given he was battling with a hamstring, I mean, what did you think of that? Obviously, he came out and said that it was a tear as well. So there was a tear, I think, of 3 centimeters or 3. Was it 3 cent? Yeah, there was a 3 centimeter tear. I think it was not 3 millimeter. It was 3 centimeters too big. Yeah, in his hamstring. But I mean, in parts he looks okay movement wise. But the Dimitrov match, I watched that, and as a neutral, I was banging my head against a wall watching Dimitrov play because it felt like. You know what it felt like? It felt like someone who had the type of record he had against Novak in the sense that the scar tissue was clearly there. Like he was just so scared almost of opening up against Novak because he probably had flashes of what was happening in the past getting destroyed by him that he didn't know how to apply himself. And I'm not saying he would have won, but he could have made it a lot closer, a lot more difficult for Novak. And I think actually Ivanisevic came out after and said that was the match I was worried about because one, Novak, that's when his hamstring was really hurting. You could tell it was visible. He wasn't moving as well. And 2, Dimitrov does have some sort of weapons, but he's that generation where they've really been mentally scarred by the big 3. And it clearly showed because he didn't know how to adapt himself. But I was so frustrated watching it. I was like, oh my gosh, you're so much better than this Dimitrov. At least make it close. But he just, I think the first set he had set points, gave it away in the tiebreaker. Yeah. And then from then on, it was just he just threw it away. And I was like, what is going on? Self-destruct for no reason. It was bizarre. Did you watch that match?
I did. And Grigor, the first set was, he was awful in the first set. And because Novak was bad because he couldn't move. So that's why I'm saying he was awful in a set that he forced a tiebreak and had a chance to win it, set point. But the backhand just wasn't there at all. I mean, it was, the backhand was a train wreck. But what happened, I think, in Novak's early round matches was there's a couple things. First of all, it wasn't affecting his offense. It wasn't affecting his serve. And that's really important because it is hard to put a Novak Djokovic on the run. It is hard to challenge his movement, especially when you're trying to return his serve. He has the skills to, use his weapons to be the bully in these points and to actually get him to a point where he's stretched out. He's, challenged in his agility or his speed to get him sprinting. These things it's not easy to do that point after point after point. In fact, it's near impossible to do at every point. Especially when you're just not as skilled. If at the end of the tournament against players who are closer to his level, what ends up happening with these top players is they run more. But against Roberto Carballes Baena, Novak's just not going to run much. So there was that part where it's a credit to his offensive weapons. It's a credit to the forehand that I mentioned that was so big all tournament long. The second thing was that it would get better as the match went on. And usually it would be after a medical timeout, after he took tablets for, anti-inflammatories, and then it would slowly get better. I think part of why Novak was having such a tough time was because he's so resistant to taking that kind of pain-killing medication. He doesn't want to take it. So that might have been a contributing factor for why it wasn't, he struggled with it so immensely early in those matches, took medical timeouts, then it got better. I thought a lot of the discourse around Novak was pretty off the walls and reckless. To me, it's pretty simple. It was an injury that did not reach the heights of severity where he needed to pull out. If it were a 250 or a 500 or even a 1000, it probably wouldn't have been worth it. And yes, he probably would have pulled out, which is what Goran said. But this is a major. You go all out. You do everything you possibly can. And, Novak's movement was compromised. It was not great. Still good enough to win. And then it got better. So I don't think it requires brain surgery. I don't think it's rocket science to kind of figure out and to reach a middle ground of, look, here was an injury. Was it the worst injury of all time? No, he could play through it. It was tough, but he could play through it, and then it got better. And for that to be so mind-blowing for some, didn't make much sense to me. Now, does he do everything in his power to hide the injury as best he possibly can? No, but who cares? I guess if people have an issue with that, that's their prerogative. I always say that about on-court behavior, right? Fans can think whatever they want. But certainly there are no rules against that. And if as an opponent, you are thrown off your game because Novak is stretching his hamstring in between points, that's on you.
Yeah, agreed. And also, I guess it's, for me though, looking at his win, right? So he won it hampered. So how much of a mental effect does that have on the rest of the field when they look at him and say, okay, well, he's getting older, but he's probably not getting much worse, but then he's also injured and he still won. And then Rafa did it last year at Roland Garros as well. These guys coming through. Well, I guess actually, let me be more specific. For Steph, right? So Steph was 2 sets love up against Novak 2 years ago at Roland Garros. He has improved, in my opinion, in some way, but then he comes up against Novak in the final, albeit in his favorite tournament, on his favorite court, and his favorite slam. He's performed here the best, fine, but still not 100% Novak, and he loses in straight sets still. So if you're Steph, what do you think he's going to take from it? Does he?
Sure.
Was it a good performance in your opinion? Should he be looking at that saying I should have done better? What's your view?
I don't think it was a great performance, no. But I don't think he looks at Novak as an injured opponent either, and I don't think he should. And I certainly don't. When he said for the De Minaur match that it wasn't bothering him, I think, I take that as the state of affairs with his hamstring. So to me, it got to 100%, especially by the final. For Tsitsipas, there are he needs, I think from a performance standpoint, the most disappointing part was the reliability issues on the forehand, because that's a part of his game that we've seen it much, much better than it was for the final. And you're disappointed with that. There are other things that Novak takes advantage of. The backhand return, the backhand defense, particularly, where Tsitsipas currently doesn't really have what it takes to do any better than he did. I actually thought all in all, he had a good backhand day, hit the backhand as well as he can. But even Tsitsipas on a good backhand day still is going to have some issues on that side with the way Novak attacks it. Ultimately, I think Tsitsipas needs to look at it like this, and I think we'll look at it like this. Incredibly positive start to the year. great at United Cup, Australian Open final, back in a major final, all really, really good stuff. And at the end of the day, is Novak still a problem? Yeah. I mean, 10 straight losses to the guy, that's still a problem. But I think you need to take the positives away from just the level that you were able to play against everybody else at the start of 2023. And now he's got to maintain it past the clay court season. I hope that he plays a little bit less tennis so that he can avoid what we've seen the last couple of years, which is that he plays great in Australia and normally has a very good clay court season and then kind of goes downhill from there.
Yeah, agreed. It'll be interesting to see because last year I know he really pushed forward trying to make sure that he adapted as much as possible on grass. So he played quite a few grass court tournaments, more than he normally would. And there were improvements when, of course, he came up against Kyrgios, who ended up making the final. But yeah, it was a disappointing. I mean, he had a disappointing Roland Garros. I mean, now you look at it and you say not a bad loss to Holger Rune, but at the time, obviously
at the time it was, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. But yeah, great tournament from him. Just maybe tactically not the best, but at the same time, it's hard to know exactly what tactics to put forward against Novak. So, but
I can comment on that though. Yeah, not a great forehand day. That's the big thing technically.
And the first set came to the net once, and he got past, and then he just stopped, didn't he?
Yeah. The net rushing or lack thereof was an interesting part of it. Probably should have forced himself to come up more, but the point I've been making is, same thing happened to Tommy Paul and the same thing happened to de Minaur, and all of them like to come forward and none of them came forward against Novak. So I think for de Minaur and Paul, especially at that point, you're losing, you have to force yourself to, but also Djokovic's court positioning and his depth, making it so tough on these guys. The biggest thing tactically, I will say for Tsitsipas is, on the second serve return, you have to do better than lose 62 or let Novak win 62% on second serve. You have to move back. Like the whole thing where he likes to try to stand up and take his backhand return early is the number one thing tactically that drives me crazy with him, because it's not a return he hits well. And I thought the biggest advantage that he wasn't able to really explore against Djokovic was physical. Like, could he make rallies physical time and time again? And I would like to have seen him experiment with a couple things, just try to grind a little bit more, play patient, come to net. I mean, it did feel like he just kind of played his game and it wasn't really good enough.
Yeah, he shanked quite a few backhand returns, and you could see by the way it just kind of looped into court, kind of swerved as well. And you're right in the points, because some of the longer points that you normally expect Novak to win, Steph was winning, maybe because of a bit of fatigue and also the injury, who knows. But either way, he was managing to actually win some of those. So that was interesting, and I think you're right. He needed to take you into the trenches a bit more and wasn't as patient at times, especially just with the backhand as well. It would be interesting to see whether he does manage to tweak that backhand return position, or even just return position generally for the second serve, especially on the ad court. But we'll see, I guess. We'll see. I'll get some questions, actually. There's quite a few coming through, if you don't mind. We can just rattle through them, if you don't mind. So Venny says, which player disappointed you the most, Gill?
Probably Medvedev, with the way he lost. Where he lost. I mean, he's been excellent at the Australian Open. He was a set away from winning the title. Sebastian Korda as a matchup, I thought might be okay for Medvedev. Daniil is someone who's excellent at handling pace, and Korda delivers a lot of pace. And traditionally, the players that Medvedev have struggled against have been some of the faster players, or the very, very net rush heavy players. And Korda kind of hit through him from the baseline. And that's a way. And to beat Medvedev in straight sets, hitting through him from the back of the court was really a wake-up call for me. Now, not that Medvedev's kind of downward trend in form hasn't been well documented and very clear. But I feel like this was a new low for Daniil to lose in the third round at this event. The conditions seem to be really good for him. Straight sets, not really a stylistic nightmare, not a Kyrgios, for example, like we saw at the US Open. Probably it's Daniil.
Yeah, that's fair. And what was your biggest upset?
Oh, definitely Popperin over Fritz. Fritz's quarter was wide open. Alexei Popperin had a horrendous 2022. And, sometimes we see these things like Kecmanovic last year. If you'll remember, Kecmanovic played great at the Australian Open, taking Novak's spot, or not taking Novak's spot, but basically he should have played Djokovic first round, didn't, and ended up going on a little bit of a run at the Australian Open, and then he was great in March. Some players are just, they refresh in the offseason, they become different players. Hopefully that'll be the case for Popperin's sake. But I did not see Popperin taking out Fritz. And for Taylor, that's also a good candidate for biggest disappointment because he was in the quarter of opportunity. The only seed that was there after the third round was Roberto Bautista Agut. And it's 2 consecutive losses against players outside the top 100 at majors for Fritz. Holt at the US Open, Popperin at this Australian Open, which is a tough loss for Taylor.
Yeah, I agree, actually. That's a really good point about the 2 opponents he's lost to. Very strange, actually.
Yeah.
That's happened, given how well he's played. And actually, you did a really good video about it for Baseline Tennis. I watched that today. So, yeah, well done. Check it out, people. It was a great video, actually. Sura Suba, even says, how long will this version of Nole last? So I guess that's an interesting question.
Well, when it comes to form with Djokovic, you got to feel out the calendar, and you got to feel out his motivation. So recently, I've done, I think, a pretty good job of that. In my predictions, I have tempered my expectations for the sun. Well, we won't see him in the Sunshine Double, but like Monte Carlo, for example, it's a tournament where he is generally not yet ramped up to 100% form. And usually he's not until Rome. So I think that after this huge push from the end of last year and winning Adelaide and winning the Australian Open, this is where Novak is going to rest, recharge, and take some time off. But what the trade-off of resting is, your fitness levels decline a little bit, your, intensity declines. And I think we'll see Djokovic probably just get off of his pace a little bit. Because right now, when I say his pace, he's won 6 of his last 7 events since Wimbledon. And the one event he didn't win was was Paris against Holger Rune, where he was up a set and a break. So that's an insane run. And at a certain point, history tells us he's just going to slow down a little bit. And I think after this big push, emotional Australian Open, I would expect that these next couple events are a little bit less successful for him.
Yeah, agreed. He's the king of peaking for slams, isn't he? He
exactly.
Really is.
Yeah. And one kind of quick addition on that, what you'll see, the reason the big 3, especially in their older age, have to peak for slams, it has to do with how hard they have the ability to train throughout the calendar year. A young player, 21 years old, might be able to train hard 6 days out of the week for the entire year. At 35 years old, you got to stop doing that, or you're going to kill yourself physically. So you have to start to get smarter about your training and also your match play. And that's why we see more ups and downs now, where the big 3, they stop dominating the Masters 1000s. We've already seen this. They stop dominating those events.
Yeah, that's true. They manage themselves a lot better, don't they? For sure. And they have to, as you said, given the age and longevity they want to achieve. Gary says, do you guys think Novak's improved speed on the forehand could be as significant as the improvement on his serve? Question.
Great question. I just need to see it in other conditions. Um, just with these kind of Dunlop balls that were notably a little bit dead and fluffy, combined with the lower bounce, combined with his hamstring injury. Um, I just need to see, is it going to look the same on the clay? Um, and if it does, that's enormous, because his averages at the Australian Open, I believe it was 82 miles per hour. That's like a Berrettini number. That's a prime Dominic team number. 82 miles per hour is about as fast as we've seen someone average on their forehand. So if Novak can do that consistently, it would be as big as the improvement of his serve. It would be an absolute game changer.
Yeah, I was very impressed with that, and it's been coming, I think, given how he's definitely prepping to play for as long as possible, and that's why he's prepped that serve, and it's now become so efficient. He gets so many free points off it. And now there's a serve and forehand, and now it's just a forehand generally as well. It's just, it's incredible to watch. Gary says, if Novak gets an 8th Wimbledon, do 10 Australian Opens and 8 Wimbledons equal as great an achievement as 14 French Opens? So clearly a Novak versus Rafa question, I guess, in terms of tallies.
Well, let's simplify this. What Novak has done at the Australian Open is actually pretty close to what Rafa's done at Roland Garros. If you put the numbers side by side, since 2011, which, like, I know we're skewing it, but we have to make it fair with Novak. If you look at Djokovic at the Australian Open since 2011, and by the way, you're taking away his 2008 Australian Open title, right? Versus Nadal's career record at the French, it's actually pretty close in terms of losses. I mean, Nadal's lost twice and Novak's lost 3 times. So it's kind of a similar thing.
Yes, good point. It's a good point. In terms of that sample size, for sure, yeah. Matthew says, at Roland Garros, Steph spoke about technical changes post his loss to Runa. Are we seeing that improvement?
I don't know which one specifically. I might have missed that. Which technical changes? The backhand slice?
Generally, probably. I mean, knowing Steph, he probably didn't specify. I guess he was probably saying that he spoke about technical changes having to be made. I guess he's saying, have you seen any technical changes, I guess, since that loss, I guess?
No, not drastically. I mean, I think that Steph has seemed like he's regained his focus on court, which was lost for a while in 2022. I think Apostolos has settled down in the box a little bit, although in the final, I thought maybe he kind of went back to his old ways of just putting a lot, way too much in Stefanos's ear. I think on the backhand side, one thing I had seen until the final was Tsitsipas just moving back and giving himself more time on the return of serve and just staying patient and being disciplined on the backhand, which is huge for him. But in terms of technique, I think the slice continues to be like, all right, better than it was 2 years ago, but pretty similar to what we were seeing last year. It's not awful anymore. It's no longer embarrassing. It used to be a slice that was not at a level of a professional tennis player. And now it is at the level of a professional tennis player. Like, he's gotten it to the point where it's not like every time he slices, it's like, dude, the ball's popping up. Like, it's not supposed to go up when you hit the slice. It's supposed to stay low. But is it a good slice? No, it's just now it's a serviceable slice.
Yeah, no, agreed on the slice for sure. Yeah, Matthew saying what you were saying. At least he gets Steph arguing with his parents all the time. Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yeah. Oh, which was better for the viewer, the men's or women's final?
Yeah, definitely the women's final. The men's final, what was so interesting about it is it did not feel that suspenseful, but technically it was close. Tsitsipas had a set point in the second set. Third set went to a tiebreak. I think a combination of the head-to-head history between the two and the fact that Djokovic, even when they play close matches, just continues to come through every single time. Combined with the fact that Novak was holding serve so easily, and the one time Tsitsipas broke serve, he was broken in the next game, which never feels like a real break of serve. It just didn't feel suspenseful. And the women's final, I mean, you mentioned that a lot of the games were super, super close. I mean, we have 6-4 in the third set. We also have that second set. 7 of the 9 games in the second set of the women's final went to deuce.
Crazy. Absolutely crazy, yeah. That was a fantastic final for sure, I agree. It was almost like the men's was inevitable, and the women's was like, oh, not sure. It's always on the edge of your seat. Yeah. Francisco says, are Alcaraz and Rune a real threat to Novak in Grand Slams?
On clay, they can be for sure. Alcaraz, got Novak in Madrid. Maybe Novak wasn't at 100% yet, but I do think his quality of play was fantastic. Alcaraz in the high bouncing conditions was using the kick serve extraordinarily well in that match. Rune just needs to do some fine tuning. All of the talent and the skills, the athleticism, all the pieces are there. But we saw against Rublev, he still plays like a teenager. He makes some silly decisions. He loses focus. He gets tight. All of those things are still in his game. So, if those things click into place, potentially, and Alcaraz, let's see what he's improved. Is the serve going to be better? And is he going to deal with the expectations well? Those are the two questions with Alcaraz.
Yeah, good. So do you think on hard court or grass they have less of a chance? And would you also chuck Sinner in there as well?
Sinner against Novak, that doesn't feel well.
I'm more talking about the Wimbledon match, but which I guess is probably not a great indicator of how the matchup might play out in the future. But
yeah, I don't know. I mean, Sinner needs to add a little bit to his game in order to be a top 5 player. Right now, I don't think he's there. He's got no major weaknesses, which I think is what people love about his game and so attractive about his game. You don't feel too comfortable going to either wing, one more than the other, and great return and great mover and great mental game. But he does need to bring some other aspects and some more variety and maybe some more firepower on the serve and some more consistency. So just get a lot of areas a little bit better if you're Jannik Sinner. The concern with Alcaraz on quicker surfaces is he going to be at a huge disadvantage with his serve? We have to see if that shot gets better. At the US Open, there were some good signs. Like that was our main takeaway when he played Ruud in the final, and we were really worried about his legs. And I thought that he was at maybe 80% in that final. Because he won it, nobody thinks about it like that. But I thought he was dead tired in the legs. He had very little in the legs. But he served way better than I've ever seen him serve out of necessity. Because he's like, I do not want to run. I need to go after my first serve. So that was a really, really positive, encouraging thing. We need to see more of that out of Alcaraz.
Yeah, agreed. Maybe Ferrer needs to just get him to do a few more miles before matches than usual, just to get him to serve bigger for the first few tournaments, and then maybe it'll become just second nature. But unless he starts losing, then that won't be great, will it? We'll see some interactions between him and the box, I'm sure. Matthew says, Andreescu and Thiem both over their injuries, so why can't they find their previous form?
Well, for Thiem, it's been kind of in phases. I mean, the biggest thing for a while there, the fitness wasn't very good. It feels like the fitness is now there, and the forehand is just not the weapon that it was. And if you're looking at a right wrist injury, it kind of makes sense that shot might take some time. So the big question for Thiem, this continues to be the big question, is there a physical limitation with his right wrist now that is going to prevent his forehand from, be getting back to the weapon that it was? I think that's kind of unclear because the firepower has started to return, and now the forehand consistency doesn't seem to be there. it's been very strange. I mean, obviously, the only issue that I have with answering this question now is I haven't seen him that much in 2023. Andreescu, I'm not all too sure. I mean, she does seem to pick up some good wins, if I'm not mistaken, but it feels like the runs aren't so much there. I would say that for Andreescu, I mean, I almost want to say she's lacking a little bit in serving firepower for a
Yeah, she is.
player who doesn't have incredible speed and fitness. So it feels very hard for her. Like things don't come that easily for her. And, she's also not like Maria Sakkari from a fitness level where like, that she can go match in and match out, get into kind of very physical battles and be okay. If that makes sense.
No, I agree. She's got the firepower from the back of the court, but it's not matched on her serve. And she also tends to not make a lot of first serves, which has been a massive issue. And she's openly spoken about it in the last year or so that she needs to make more first serves. She needs to go for a bit more as well because her second serve points won percentage is always low, and she always tends to get punished on that. So there's a couple of areas for improvement for sure, but she's very talented, and when it clicks, I think she does look very good. But I think it's a question of the draw, etc. as well. Lehechka and Shelton, what do you think they can achieve this season, Gill?
I think Lehechka can be top 25. I mean, I maybe the expectation should be even higher for him based on what he did at the AO, but I don't know. I mean, he's rock solid. Like I don't find him to be particularly creative. I don't think he has an elite serve yet. I don't think he's incredibly fast around the court in terms of his coverage, but he reminds me a lot of Berdych. Very easy power off of both wings. He reminds me a lot of Korda as well. So, good firepower. And also, he is very fit, very strong in terms of his footwork and his balance when he's on the run. Those things are good. For Shelton, hard to say right now with Ben Shelton. I think similar to Lehechka, I think he can be top 25. The firepower is there. He's an unbelievable athlete for his size. The way he moves that weight around, he's very explosive. I love his transition game. That backhand is going to be the big issue right now because at the college level or at the lower level, when the ball isn't coming as quick, Shelton has time on that two-hander to kind of pull off. I'm not going to pantomime it lefty, but I can do it righty. It's very long. And normally we see one-handers with those big, long swings. He's got a two-hander with that big, long swing. And the return of serve on the backhand will be an issue. And the intensity, players who can go a lot of pace, take time away, hit very intense to the Shelton backhand, they're going to have a lot of success with that. So just got to clean that up. But I think he can do big things. I think both of them can be top 25. I don't think either of them will be top 15.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, Ben Shelton has a huge serve as well. I didn't realize how big it was.
Enormous.
Massive. I mean, I was just thinking, wow. So another big server to add it to the tour. And Matt says, I don't like the night matches at Roland Garros as it's so slow and the very late finishes at the Australian Open and US Open. What do you think be done? I assume the late finishes at Australian Open, US Open, no. But I'll get your views on it as well. And night matches at Roland Garros?
Well, night matches at Roland Garros, I feel, if I'm remembering correctly, it was not a very good year for them last year. Like I think the matches were lacking in quality. It's also strange because it's a one ticket event. Like it's weird in the first round. I think it's a tough sell for a fan. In the first round, you're going to go to Philippe Chatrier to watch one match. It's normally going to be in last year's case, it's usually going to be a men's match. I just think the night session works better if you at least have 2 matches, give a men's match, give a women's match. At the same time, the late finishes, my stance is this. I like the late finishes. I don't like the early morning finishes. Like, I just think you reach a threshold where it gets ridiculous. I think that threshold is probably at 1:30 in the morning, 1 in the morning. And that's where it's like, all right, this can't happen. If they're playing till midnight, to me, that's kind of fun. Just, I like that. I don't know. If I'm at the US Open going to a night session, especially if it's a Friday night or a Saturday night, I'm into that. I think it's actually kind of awesome to have sports entertainment go on until midnight. But yeah, then it gets to a point where you are killing the players. The stadium has emptied out. People aren't watching on TV. The people working the event who have to show up the next day, they're being destroyed. And it becomes something that is not beneficial for anyone. So look, I just think they should start these night sessions a little bit earlier. I think it should be maybe a 6 p.m. start local time, maybe even a 5:30 p.m. start instead of the 7 p.m. start where we've seen some of these really, really late finishes.
Yeah, I don't get the how long the break is between the end of the day session and the night session. I don't really understand.
Get rid of that. That's how to fix it.
Because for Wimbledon you don't have it, and I guess that's because there's a curfew, so you can't. It's just it rolls through the day, right? And that's it. You just you get a ticket for the day. Whereas I know for other tournaments you can get it for the day session and night session. Right. But I mean, Murray was playing until what, 3 a.m. against Kokkinakis?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just like crazy. But then I guess
crazy.
As I say, you can play earlier. But what do you do if it does go longer? Do you play the next day? But then potentially, you're then messing up the schedule. It's difficult to know, really. It's just there's a lot of. I know it's already hard to schedule as it is, tennis matches, and I know because I'll be like, yeah, I'm gonna do commentary for a match at 7 p.m. and then next thing you know, I'm doing it at 10 p.m. because it's moved back 3 hours just because of the matches before.
Yeah, I think once you start the match, you have to finish. I don't think it's fair not to finish the match.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be opposed to, like, let's say things were going really, really late. If you can recognize that at a certain point and move a match to tomorrow, just be like, okay, the match is postponed as if there was a rain delay, so we're going to play it tomorrow. That I think is fair game. Yeah, they just need to look, even if it's starting at another thing that they've done is they haven't started on Arthur Ashe at 11 a.m. Like, all of the courts will start at 11 a.m. Ashe will start at noon. Why? Right? Move Ashe up to 11 and then move the night session up. Like, it can all be shifted to earlier to avoid a lot of those super late starts, and it would still go late sometimes, which is fine. Again, I think everybody's into and okay with late tennis. There's late tennis, and then there's like stuff that gets to become a really big burden on a lot of people. And I think once you cross about 1:30 a.m., it starts to become a burden.
Yeah, I agree. And it's an interesting point that the other courts do start at 11 a.m. Even at Wimbledon, it's 11 a.m. But then on centre court, it starts at 1 p.m. Why? like yes. For example, when I went to court 1 2 years ago, and then they had Kyrgios Umber. They brought them on, and they played. I think it was like 3.5 sets, and then it ended up being 5 sets overnight. They would have finished if they started earlier, and I'm just moaning about it because I wanted to see the end of it. But genuinely, it would have been great, right? Just to have them finish the match, and for the players, it's great as well. But yeah, there's a few more here, Gill. Of course, just let me know when you need to jump off. I know, of course, you've got a busy schedule as well.
Okay, let's do a couple more.
Gary says statistics. One that I saw yesterday demonstrates that Novak is the all-time best tiebreak player.
Yeah.
Does the visual match the stats?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to put him next to maybe Pete Sampras. That would be interesting to me. I haven't seen Pete's record, but yeah, I mean, Novak Yes, the visual matches the stats. He tends to never miss in breakers. I just think he's the best player under pressure. In clutch situations, I don't think there's ever been anyone better. Maybe Pete, because the serve always came through. Novak does it in a different way, where he will always make you earn everything. He won't miss in big tie breaks. And generally, when other players are getting nervous and playing worse in the breakers, making more mistakes, Novak he gets better. There's no doubt about it. He gets better. And because he's such a good mover, because his defense is so good, because his depth is so good, he's able to execute these things under pressure and just not give you anything. Yeah, it's unbelievable what he does. 5 straight tie breaks he's won against Tsitsipas now.
Crazy. Such a mental giant, isn't he, in the tiebreakers? He just incredible. He manages it so well as well. Max says, what do you make of the Swiatek being tearful at the United Cup? And then speaking about playing not to lose. I found it hard to believe with someone so dominant as number one.
Yeah, I don't know if it was about representing her country. I don't know if it was about how badly she lost, because she really did get crushed, probably worse than I guess. I don't know.
Crazy. It wasn't expecting.
No, I wasn't expecting it either. So I'm not sure what really struck a nerve, other than probably the fact that, she's super devastated whenever she loses. But it was probably the team, the pressure of playing for the team. I think she probably felt like she let Poland down, which was maybe something that she's not used to, as opposed to letting herself down. And sometimes those team events can be more intense emotionally in that way. So that's how I would explain it. I also think a lot of players cry. You don't see it, but I think a lot of players after the match, they cry in the locker room. They cry in the tunnel. But generally, nobody wants to really cry on TV, so they hold it in. They go backstage and then they cry. So
exactly, I cried last week when I lost.
Yeah, I think it's pretty normal.
Yeah, exactly. I was just playing a local club match. I was just joking, but yeah, I agree. I like, it's such a high pressure environment, right, with the crowd as well, and of course all the expectation. And if you're playing at that high level, it's not a surprise that, I mean, anyone that watched Breakpoint will know that a lot of these players do cry, and it's some of the players even start contemplating, should I even do this? Like, I shouldn't even play, right? Which is like even more like mind blowing. But they're like, you know what? I forget this. I'm done. Like, they're saying, I've retired for 3 days. So that can happen as well, because it's just so intense, and I feel like everything is amplified with all the pressure, expectation. Like, a lot of these people are representing their countries as well. Like, say Tsitsipas and Zachary, they're the best players Greece have ever had. So that's it. They're flying the flag for Greece. So it's huge expectation for sure. And talking of people on court, when are we going to see more action of Gill on court? We saw him beat Philip Farmer a few years ago. Is there a video of him versus Groskin? If you come to the UK, I'll give you a match. I don't know. I've seen you play. You're quite good. So it's tough on video to get a good gauge of how someone is. And also, the angle wasn't like front on. But you're clearly a pretty good player. I don't know if I'll be able to match up with you, but I'll give you a match. But yeah, when are we going to see you back on court? Are we going to see any video footage?
Yeah, well, first of all, I appreciate the revisionist history. I actually lost to Philip Farmer. We only played one set, so I guess it wasn't a match. But yeah, I lost the set. So I'm injured right now. Actually, I've had a really pesky hip flexor injury, just like Rafa. So it's something that I was hoping and expecting to heal on its own for a long time, and it just hasn't. So I'm at the point where it's time to get the doctors involved, because I haven't been able to make it better myself. So I'm in a bit of a slump right now, and I gotta build myself back up. There's no video of me versus Gruskin, but we've hit a bunch, and I think at some point I will play Gruskin and we'll put it on YouTube and talk about it. Some point.
Oh, okay. Who do you think is going to win? Go on, you can tell me. You can be quietly confident.
Me.
Me. No sweat.
Yeah.
No sweat. Exactly. Gary says, Gill, how did you just become the very best tennis analyst around at such a young age?
Well, thank you. That's kind. I wouldn't call myself the best. Um, but I mean, if the key is knowing, listening to smart people and being a sponge. I mean, I credit a lot of the coaching that I got as a junior, but then also just really absorbing certain lessons that I've learned in books I've read, from people who I hold at a high esteem. If someone like, great analysts like Jim Courier, I don't want to start name dropping a bunch because I know I'm going to include some and disclude some that I don't want to. But like, if someone like Courier, for example, is commentating on a match, um, you know, I was always someone who was really going to absorb the information, study that kind of stuff, and it was going to stick in my head. But also, I want to say part of it is just focusing. Um, and forcing yourself when you watch a match to interpret things in a way that and it's not always best for the enjoyment of the match, but part of what I do that a lot of tennis media isn't doing is focusing incredibly hard as if you're playing the match on what is happening in the match.
Yeah.
And that goes a really, really long way, and anyone can do it. It's not a skill. It's not because I'm smart. It's just that if I'm going to analyze a match, I'm going to be able to actually lock in mentally and really give it my all in understanding it.
Well, that's a really good point, because I was actually going to ask you before you said that. Do you think playing at a decent level, even if it's club level, gives you a better eye for these types of details? Because I feel like, I play once or twice a week, and decentish level if we're talking about club level,
Mm-hmm.
but I do think it really does help. When I watch matches, I'm always looking out for certain things. Of course, it's a completely different ball game in terms of level, but you do look out for things, right? You think, okay, what's going on here? That person's getting attacked. Okay, his backhand's getting attacked. How's he going to adapt to it? How's he going to get out of that exchange? The backhand to backhand. How does he adapt? Does he use the backhand slice? Does he try and go line first? If he does, there's more risk involved, because I know if I was going to go backhand line, I wouldn't be super comfortable doing that regularly. So you think about those types of things, and I guess, of course, you compare it a little bit to your game, but also generally as a tennis player, like what you should be doing. So I do think it helps a lot. Do you find the same for yourself as well?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with growing up playing, I think, was coaching. And one thing I did was not just learn from what coaches said to me, but at the Chris Lewitt Tennis Academy, which is primarily where I trained, some other places, I would listen very carefully to when other players were getting coached. And I think a lot of players were not like that, but because I was such a student of it and I was such a nerd about it, I wouldn't only listen to what was being said to me. I want to know what's being said to everyone, because it's a chance for me to learn and think about the sport in that way. And then also I involved myself, in doing some coaching myself at the academy, not at a super high level, but that was another experience that helped me learn. So I think that goes a really, really long way. I mean, everything I know is, came from somewhere, is taught from somewhere. Um, and yeah, playing and getting coached, I think, is a big part of that.
Yeah, I agree. I had some coaching when I was a bit younger as part of the Wimbledon Junior Tennis Initiative. So I got scouted when I was very young, to be fair. I stopped it when I was 13 because I didn't want to wake up as a teenager. Teenagers do stop doing it. But I did it from like 5 to 13. I feel like that really did help when I got a bit older. One, playing as well, because I took a bit of a break, didn't really play much. And also, like, even just watching as well. I think it makes a massive difference. And you've done coaching yourself and a really reputable academy as well. So I'm sure that it sounds like you are a massive sponge there as well. So yeah, definitely. You might not see the best, but you're definitely one of the best around for sure. So thanks, Gill. Appreciate it as always. I know there might be some more questions coming as well, but it's fine. I can address those. I know you've given a lot more time than you said you would, so I appreciate it as well. So yeah, obviously feel free to jump on. But thank you, Gill. Appreciate it as always. We'll catch up again for sure.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Faizan, and thank you everyone for watching. And enjoy the post Australian Open rest, unless you're locked in on the Hua Hin, which if you are, respect.
Thanks, Gill. Cool. Thanks to Gill. I really appreciate him being on as always. I can answer even some questions before we wrap it up. Anthony says, do you expect a dominant clay season from Swiatek? Thinking about possible rivalries in clay, if she's at a good level, I don't see it. It's a good question. I think there's a few rivals that could potentially challenge her, but she is going to be the favourite in every single clay court tournament she plays. Andreescu will be one. She had a really good clay court season last year, but she lost in the first round of Roland Garros, which was a massive upset. Now, she should have a pretty decent clay court season again if she's fully fit. She was underwhelming at the Australian Open. Looked like she was carrying a little bit of an injury as well, niggle. So if she's fully fit, she should prove some sort of challenge. Whether that's, a really competitive challenge, we'll see. I mean, they play each other at Rome, if I'm not mistaken, the final, and she lost pretty convincingly in straight sets, but there were some competitive moments in that match. But Swiatek will always, hold the advantage or be the favorite anyway in that matchup. I actually think, despite Sabalenka being really good on the quicker surfaces, she's also very good on clay. Not quite as good, given how her game, I think, is, and how she's able to really just out-hit people from the back of the court, out-serve people. And, of course, on the clay, her serve is nullified a little bit, and people do have more of a chance against it, for example. But she will prove to be pretty good as well. I mean, she's always pretty good on the clay, and given that she's now got this confidence after the Australian Open, she will, I'm sure, have some good results on the clay. So she's another one. It's tough because on the women's side, there's probably a lot of players that could prove some sort of challenge, but there's no one that really springs to mind. I mean, Caroline Garcia, despite being French, I don't think she particularly likes the French Open because it doesn't really suit her game. She is someone who likes to serve big, rush the net, transition well, hits really, really big groundies as well when needed, and she likes to attack the return. Now, she'll be able to attack the return at Roland Garros because the serve won't be as potent as well, but stepping forward might prove a bit tricky if someone has a very good kick serve. So she may have some trouble there, and she may not be able to step and be inside the baseline as much as she'd like on second serve return, especially. So one to keep an eye out for to see how she does. But historically, she hasn't done great at Roland Garros even, or on clay. She prefers the grass, prefers the hard courts. I'm trying to think about who else. Sakari could, but she's very up and down. I don't know whether she has the game to beat Swiatek, if I'm being honest with you. There's lots of players that you could think of, but I think exactly what you said, Anthony, that Swiatek, if she is at a good level, I think it's going to be very, very hard to see anyone else beat her on the clay, especially at Roland Garros. Gary says, I think Sabalenka's ground strokes are now head and shoulders above the rest of the field. I know it can be fleeting, but do you agree? Yes. I think at this current moment, if we're talking about currently on form, Sabalenka's ground strokes are the best. If we actually talk about the percentage of winners that she hits on points won, it's incredible. She was close to 50% of winners. So 50% of points won were winners at the Australian Open, just under. So that's every other point is a winner. Every other point won is a winner from Sabalenka. Absolutely ridiculous. I mean, crazy. So that's an ace or a clean winner from the back of the court. I mean, impressive to say the least. Really, really good to see as well, because what she's done is she's evolved a little bit. She has become a little bit patient from the back of the court, and she picks her moments. She really does pick her moments a lot better. She still hits with intent, but what she does is she doesn't necessarily take pace off the ground strokes. Sometimes she will. Sometimes she will when she needs to. She's not going to try and hit herself out of trouble. But what she does really well is she will still hit with the same intensity, but just give herself a little bit more margin. And she won't go for the lines quite as much. She might even go deep down the middle and hard down the middle and try and get the opponent rushed even in that moment. And then what she does is she waits for the shorter ball, she steps in. Or she waits for a ball that comes back to her with a lot of air. She has time, and then she just pounces on it. And there's a point against Rybakina where she had to hit 4 or 5 hammer forehands to win the point. But she was patient. You could see she didn't rush it. She didn't get frustrated. She didn't snatch at the forehands. She really waited and waited, and then ended up winning the point. It was really impressive and broke her down. Gary says, David, her winner / unforced error stats at the Australian Open were ridiculous. Not sure anyone's ever been as good. So I think Serena, Steffi would disagree with there not ever being better ground strokes. No, but David, I think Gary's talking about currently on the women's tour. Not the women's tour. Not the women's ever. I don't think he's talking about in history. He's talking about currently. Leo says, Sabalenka has evolved her game and she's not stopping. Yep. Yeah, agreed. Guys, if you've got more questions, fire them in. We'll go for another 5-10 minutes, depending on how many people want to ask questions. But in the meantime, we have a very, very interesting video as well, by the way, being released. It will be on Friday, which is a statistical analysis comparing Wawrinka to the big three. And their matchups, and going through. So there's some stats that have been put together actually by Hassan, who put it together himself, and there's visuals as well. So there's very small bits of match footage, and also some statistics in there as well that have been put together, which I think is going to make a really, really good video for sure. So I would recommend checking it out on Friday as well. That'll be released. A very different type of video, but a lot of you tended to like the statistical analysis that we've been doing. We've been doing a little bit more statistical analysis since the start of the Australian Open. And of course, like Gill, we do try to do some post-match analysis, but he is the real kind of OG on that. I try my best. I do play a fair bit, but I'm sure some people prefer Gill's, and there might be a smaller minority that may prefer my analysis as well. David says, what's the Wimbledon initiative, Fazan? So it's called the WJTI. It's the Wimbledon Junior Tennis Initiative. Now, what that means is, or what the initiative is, it's an initiative that goes around mainly the local areas around Wimbledon, and they go around all the primary schools. So they're around the kids. When did I get scouted? When I was 6 or 7, maybe. And they go around all the schools in the local area, so local radius. I think it was, I don't know how many schools it was, but they'll go around all the schools, and what they do is they get every single class or every single, of a certain age to do like a little tennis day. And what they do is they just do a little day basically of hand-to-eye coordination, and they see whether anyone can play at a certain level, and they'll ask, like, has this person ever played before? So I'd never played before. I think I was 5 or no, I must be 6 or 7 maybe, I imagine. I'd never played before, and they basically scouted me, and they pick a very few amount of kids, and they say, okay, we want you to be part of the initiative because we think you've got potential. And and then you go and train with them once or twice a week, normally twice a week at Wimbledon. So, like, at the grounds, you don't practice on the grass courts. They have they used to anyway have a couple of junior courts that you'd use, or like kiddie courts. They weren't juniors in Wimbledon juniors. They were like, you're younger than that, right? So you would do your softball skills and play with the green balls. So it's the green colored balls, the orange balls. You work your way up. Now they actually have indoor centers, which actually someone that I know who's a lot younger, a relative actually does, which is incredible. So they have a lot of indoor and outdoor courts, and they're like Grand Slam standard hard courts. They also have grass courts as well, but they get coaching one-to-one. So I got coaching as well. Not one-to-one, but in groups even. And yeah, you get it with qualified coaches who are very, very good. Of course, they work for Wimbledon and work for the LTA. And then it's, I guess, a springboard. What they do, they start dividing kids into certain levels. So you'll have like the advanced level where they think they're going to be able to make it to junior level, and actually play junior tennis at, say, slams, and then also push on to be professional. And then they have, other groups, which is like, it's more like a social, like, okay, they're still improving, but they kind of shift you between. So I did it until I was about 12, 13, and then I stopped doing it because I was playing other sports. And as a silly teenager, I was like, no, I'm going to stop doing it. So I don't want to wake up early both Saturday and Sunday. And I stopped doing it. And yeah, and I would probably be a lot better than I am now if I carried on doing it, at least for a few more years. But yeah, it is what it is, I guess. Drem says, was Pegula beating Iga just a one-off? It's tough to say, honestly, because given what happened at the Australian Open, both players underperformed, you would say, although Rybak and I expected to beat Swiatek. Pegula losing to who did she lose to in the end? Actually, I've completely forgotten now. Ooh, I've completely forgotten. What's wrong with me? Pegula lost to someone that I would have expected her to beat, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, Azarenka, that's it. Yeah, in the quarterfinals. Yeah, that was a little bit disappointing. I know Azarenka is very good on the hard courts, but she should be beating it at this stage in her career. Will it be a one-off? You would expect Pegula to beat her once. If they were to play another 4 times, I'd expect it to beat her once. It's difficult to know where both these guys are mentally and physically, honestly. Okay, Fazan says, Gary says even, Fazan, since I asked Gill, how did you reach such a high level as a tennis analyst? Well, first of all, thank you. I appreciate it. It's a lot of studying. I mean, Gill said a similar thing, and I know I mentioned it as well when he gave his answer, but genuinely, it's just hard work. It's about grafting. Like, I do a lot of, and I enjoy it. It's a passion, tennis. It really is. So because it's a passion, because I enjoy it, it's not really work in the sense that I will look up certain stats. I will look and watch historical matches, and I'll look at patterns of play. For example, I'll look at full matches and highlights, and then, okay, is this matching my expectations? I will, I'll listen to other people like Gill. I'll listen to other experts as well, and try and see whether, okay, they're speaking about something specific to do with this player. Does it marry up to what I expect? Even, for example, the tennis insights, right, from Tennis Viz that are on Instagram that I was sharing during the Australian Open. I was like, I saw it online and I was like, hold on, this is a really interesting new metric that they're using. And of course, it's data analytics. So I thought, this is fantastic. Why not use this? So I obviously looked into it and how they calculate it. And then I thought, okay, let's talk about this, because it's great to have some sort of metric for someone's attributes, and then you can compare it to what you actually think from a visual perspective. You can compare it to your visual perspective and then see whether it marries up. So that's great as well. Yeah, with golf, that makes sense. Yeah. What's your opinion on Rebecca's coaching or coach controversy? Nothing really. I mean, she came out after and said that there's nothing to see here, basically, nothing to talk about. She's happy with her coach, so that's all that matters. As long as she's happy with her coach, doesn't really matter what other people say, honestly. That's what I would say. Right, okay, we're going to wrap this up in the next 2 minutes, but thank you guys for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Gary says, Fazan, you're one of the best at patterns of play. I learned so much from you. I'm just a big picture guy when it comes to this great game. Thank you. I appreciate it. And that is really from playing, to be honest with you, as well, a lot. And also watching a lot of great players and understanding, okay, how do they open up space on the court? And, you know, what kind of matchups we need to look out for. And, you know, there's a lot of dynamics at play. But, I mean, if you want to simplify it, it's all about the serve return dynamic and then the ground stroke exchanges. So backhand to backhand, forehand to forehand. That's a safe. Everyone's going to go cross-court first for the most part. And then, okay, who can change up line? Who has the ability to change line effectively and be comfortable doing it? And then who's able to transition well to the net? Are they comfortable coming to the net as well in the forecourt? Or are they going to potentially not be? And there's a lot of things to look out for. Anyways, thank you very much, guys. Really do appreciate it. Stay safe and well. And we will probably do, well, I will do probably my own recorded video where I break down the Australian Open as a review, because I think it needs doing, especially for the women's side and the men's side. And I might try and I'd like to do specific players, but there's a lot of players to get through in terms of reviewing their tournament. So I might try and do it on one video and timestamp it. That might be a good idea. So thank you very much, guys. Stay safe and well. We'll see you on the next video.
All I wanna be Bye.